Welcome to video 2 in the 5-video series. We're going to start by taking the word project management and separating them and look at each in turn. We're going to start with the word management. And this is a journey which will take us into France just before the First World War and introduce you to a man by the name of Henri Fayol, who was working in the coal industry at that time, and he developed, with all his experience, 5 functions of management. Essentially, 4 of those functions are a cyclical process where a manager would plan, organise, execute and control the work. So they'd plan the work to be done, you'd organise the resources to do it, you'd execute the work so it gets done, and then you'd control progress to achieve the plan or go back to the top and start replanning if that was necessary. The 5th function is the idea that you're leading the team of people involved doing all that work. So there's a lead function as well. We'll see later in this program how the plan, organise, execute, control and lead functions of management link in to projects. But before that, let's consider a history of projects. For this brief history of projects, I guess the question is, where do you start? Obviously, people have been building things for many thousands of years. For example, the pyramids of Egypt. And at that time, they must have had some sort of management to organise those resources to produce such magnificent, large-scale buildings. But equally, they had slave labour and not much health and safety legislation going on. So, in terms of what we would traditionally associate today, they had projects of sorts, but it was nothing near where we've got to today. Moving forward in time to the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution, again there was some magnificent buildings going on, and at that point it tended to be the architects and engineers who developed their own systems for doing things. They did stuff on their own and developed these wonderful buildings. Coming further to World War I, we've mentioned that Henri Fayol published his theories on management in French, and that worked fine in the coal industry, but that wasn't really project management. I guess it was really post-World War II, with the global reconstruction that war had throughout the globe, that people started to develop a body of knowledge for project management, thinking and communicating together. It was at that time that Henri Fayol's work was translated from French into English, so it received a wider recognition. It was also, particularly in the reconstruction of Japan, developed the concept of total quality management, or TQM. And the 2 biggest sort of components of that really were Joseph Duran, who worked in the sort of process industries and the manufacturing processes of Japan as it was reconstructing, and he developed a system of quality called zero defects, where obviously you're aiming for perfection, and that's a big factor in the car industry these days. And there was another guy by the name of Edward Deming who looked at quality from a slightly different angle, and that was that whatever you had now, you could always improve on it. So it's this idea of continuous improvement. Moving forward even further into the 60s, there was the exponential growth in knowledge generated by the space race that was triggered by John F. Kennedy's inspirational speech on the 12th of September 1962 at Houston's Rice Stadium, where he set the goal of sending a man to the moon and returning him safely back to Earth by the end of the decade. It fostered a culture of innovation, collaboration and sharing across different industries, leading to best practice, including the development of projects and project management as we'd perhaps more traditionally know it today. So this has helped develop the whole knowledge base that we now refer to as project management, or the body of knowledge. And I like to think of it as if you went to a garage to have your car repaired, the mechanic wouldn't have a single tool to repair your car with, he'd have a whole toolbox. And in some respects, the project manager's body of knowledge is a bit like the project manager's toolbox, where there's a whole lot of tools, techniques and processes that a project manager can choose to use on a project. And there's this idea of, from the total quality management movement, where you're always trying to develop yourself and improve, because things don't stand still. So the fundamentals of this body of knowledge and this project manager's toolbox of best practice is the need to understand and apply the fundamentals of project management. We need to apply common sense and avoid one size fits all, as those approaches inevitably don't really work, and can often appear to be bureaucratic. As I say, we've got a number of tools and techniques, and you wouldn't go to a garage and expect the mechanic to only use a wrench to fix your car. There's a whole host of things to choose from. And also in sort of the more recent decade, the body of knowledge has started to make a distinction between projects, programs and portfolios as slightly different flavours of how these tools and this toolbox might be used. So if that's the project management body of knowledge and the idea of the project manager's toolbox of best practice, it's about time we actually defined what we meant by a project. Now, to be honest, if you asked every project manager, you'd probably get a very slightly different version of a definition, but they'd all have common themes. And in some respects, it's confused a little bit by the best-selling time management books, which simplistically describe a project as anything being more than one task. As I said in the introduction about my background, I've done a Master's in Business Administration and MBA in specialising in project management. And I guess every project manager remembers the definition that was first taught to them. So that's where I'm going to start, and then we'll examine the different elements of it to see if we can come up with an improved and a version of that. So I was taught that a project is an endeavour in which human, material and financial resources are organised in a novel way to undertake a unique scope of work to a given specification within the constraints of time and cost, defined by quantitative and qualitative objectives to achieve a beneficial outcome or change. Now that's a bit of a mouthful, and it's not that easy to remember, but as I say, it has some common elements which we'll go through now, and that was probably a slightly academic definition of a project. Let's aim for something a bit more practical. But what's that definition saying? Well, it's really saying that what we're going to do is we've got this piece of work that we then need to bring a group of people together to form some sort of temporary organisational structure to get this thing done. But what we're doing hasn't really been done before, and certainly hasn't been done by this group of people before. There's some constraints of time, cost and quality that we have to run this project by, and the whole reason for doing the project is to produce some business output, some capability, and ideally that's supported by some business rationale, whether that's a formal business case or just some other form of measurement, so that we know once we've delivered something, we've actually got to where we want to do, which again goes back to this idea of quality. So they're the common elements. That's what a project is. So on this video, we've briefly looked at what management is all about. We've given a history of projects and how they've developed and introduced the idea of the project management body of knowledge. And we've defined a project in a simple way of it being a group of people working together in a temporary organisational structure, doing some work that has not been done before to constraints of time, cost and quality to achieve some business output or capability. On the next video, we'll look at the 7 components of a project that a project manager has to juggle with every day they work on every project. And it's also worth noting that in the bonus video section of this site, there's some information on programs and portfolios. If you remember in the project management body of knowledge section, I said that now there's an increasing distinction as the body of knowledge it develops of making a distinction between projects, programs and portfolios. And although the programs and portfolios isn't core to this 5 free videos, I thought it would be useful to have some extra information if it's of interest to you, and they're available on this site. So anyway, I'll see you on the next video.